Okay. We are continuing on here on page 23. Page 23, right? Page 23? Yeah, page 23. Okay, the vocabulary words for tonight. We will be covering these things here. Vocabulary words. They will destroy many. That's found in Daniel 8:25 and refers to the fact that these great wars are coming. And we'll run across these phrases as we go through the night. Abomination of desolation refers, of course, to the Lord of the heavenly habitation. And promotion, Matthew 24:16, traditionally translated as mountain, refers to the uplifting of the woman or the uplifting of the house of Yahweh. And we'll cover these a little later. Break in pieces is found in Daniel 7:7, and it means crushing and mangling in war. And of course, the little horn is found in Daniel 7, verse 8, and that refers to the spokesman of the Catholic Church. Okay? So these are things that we'll go through tonight. So here, starting here on page 23, at the top of the page here, in the first paragraph, it says, turn back to Revelations 11. The 42 moons of war include this time period of the two witnesses. The work of the two witnesses are the last day's work of the house of Yahweh, of the seventh Malach, the seventh messenger, the seventh work of Yahweh. Of course, that work is to finish the work, to finish the saints, and to finish the righteousness of the saints. Let me just go over this, reiterate that here in Revelations 11. Okay, it talks about the 42 moons of war, and as we just read, the time period includes the time, Revelations 11 includes the time period of the two witnesses, okay, and that's shown to the world. The identities, of course, are revealed without doubt as to who they are. It talks about the work of the two witnesses. That's shown what they must do because it's prophesied of them to do it. Remember, Yahweh says in Isaiah 44, let them foretell these things, right? And, of course, it talks about the last day's work of the house of Yahweh. As Pastor is always saying, hurry, work, 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 because there's a lot that needs to get done to bring in the kingdom. And it also refers to of the seventh Malach, speaks of the seventh Malach, the seventh messenger. And this is the most overlooked part of the prophecy, of course, that only the house of Yahweh understands as being the blessed of Yahweh, right? Because this is how the world will be blessed. Remember, they will be blessed out of the house of Yahweh, or from the house of Yahweh. Okay, so those are some of the things that we just covered here in Revelations 11. So let's read that again. The 42 moons of war include this time period of the two witnesses. The work of the two witnesses are the last day's work of the house of Yahweh, of the seventh Malach, or the seventh messenger. And this is, of course, the seventh work of Yahweh. And that work, of course, is to finish the work, to finish the saints, to finish the righteousness of the saints. Now, one of the handouts is Daniel 9:24. Daniel 9:24.
Weeks are determined upon your people and upon your holy city, to finish transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up division and prophecy, and to anoint the holiest of the holy people.
Praise Yahweh. So 70 weeks are determined upon the people to bring these things about the holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sin, to make reconciliation for iniquity, and to bring in the everlasting righteousness. And that's what it's referring to here when it says the seventh work of Yahweh is to finish that work, to finish the saints, to finish the righteousness of the saints. Okay, so that reference note there is Daniel 9:24. Okay, and of course it talks about the sealing of the vision and the prophecy, and to anoint the holiest of the people, of course, which will be the house of Yahweh. Okay? Continue on here then. Now this next sentence here, highlight this. When the saints take over the governments of the world, there won't be such a thing as democracy. Okay? Because when the saints take over the governments of the world, democracy can't exist. Okay? It won't exist because Remember, it's for the people, they say, okay, but it's by the people. And that's the problem, is it's by people. It's by mankind. Mankind has rejected the laws of Yahweh, okay? And of course, only the laws of Yahweh is what brings peace. Now, I thought the rest of this paragraph here was important too. It says, we will follow the laws of righteousness and peace, which you don't have in the world today in any of the governments. Any of the governments. You know, I Googled how many forms of governments are there in the world. And I came across one site that had 44 different types of governments. 44 different types of man's governments throughout the world. Now, there may be more than that, I don't know. But the thing is, it's like 44. It's like they can't even agree on one, right? But you can see, remember what we've been talking about, is the prophecies say that democracy is what's going to take over. It's democracy that they're pushing throughout this world, because democracy is the way of the first beast, okay? And the second beast is desperately pushing this upon all the world. And we saw what democracy is all about. It's simply, you know, based on the laws that govern and restrict the majority of the people, and it only pushes the wealthy minority in power. And so it's always set up for what they're going to get out of it, right? So it says this is the main difference. There is nothing in democracy in the way that it is performed that would actually hold or secure peace. It's based on wealth and a minority holding captive the majority with the power and money and wealth, okay? The power of money and wealth. They hold captive the majority. Remember, that's what we saw about that chokehold they have on. And if it doesn't work, well, then they pass another law that was pushed forth, you know, the law that they're trying to get control over the people with. So it's not based upon anything that has to do with righteousness. There's no fairness whatsoever in there. All right, Revelations 11:1 here, and 11:2 and 3. All of these you can mark down. In Revelations 1, notice it says, and it was given to me a reed like a measuring rod, and he stood saying, measure the temple. Now this is our day. This is where the outer court is left out, okay? Verse 2, notice it says, but the court that is outside the temple, leave out, okay? Leave that court outside, okay? Don't fool with it. It's given to the nations, notice. It's given to the nations. Okay, so verse 3, it says, and I will give power to my two witnesses. So these two witnesses have power. They have authority. These things are given to them, and they will perform their prophetic office, and they will foretell events about the 2,260 days cast about with darkness. These are the two olive trees that were spoken of in Zechariah. Okay, Zechariah. Okay, these are the two olive trees that's spoken of. So the thing is, what you want to highlight for sure is the outer court is outside the temple. Leave it out. And that these two olive trees are spoken of in Zechariah. Zechariah 4:11-14. He says, then I answered and said to him, what are these two olive trees on the right side of the lampstand and upon the left side of it? And then I spoke to him again and said to him, what are these two olive branches which through the two golden pipes empty the golden oil through them? And he answered me and said, do you not know who these are? And I said, no, my ruler. And then he said, these are the two anointed ones who stand for the supreme ruler of the whole earth. Okay? So you can see how it talks about the two witnesses and these two olive trees. Now, olive trees hold some symbolic references here for olive trees. In Hosea 14:6, says his branches will spread and his beauty will be like an olive tree and his fragrance like Lebanon. Okay, so you can see here that the olive tree is referring to as beauty. Okay, so it's like an olive tree, it says the beauty of it. And then you see in Psalm 52, verse 8, but we are like green olive trees in the house of Yahweh. We trust in your mercy, O Yahweh, forever and ever. So here you see where it's referring to the green olive trees as the house of Yahweh, the people of Yahweh. Because of the fact that you remember with the two witnesses were being fed that olive oil, that golden oil that comes forth from them. In Jeremiah 11, verse 16, it says, Yahweh called your name green olive tree, lovely with righteous fruit. So here you see that there is beauty in the house of Yahweh, and of course, they are producing this righteous fruit. Okay? I just wanted to point that out because of the fact that when you read about the olive trees and stuff, you can see how, and other prophets as well talked about the olive tree as well. Okay, so he says here, these are the two olive trees that are spoken of in Zechariah. Now, Daniel 8:25, he says, by peace, of course, this is speaking of the same little horn with the fourth beast that we just saw in Revelation 13 that blasphemes Yahweh. Okay? And you see the same thing here. He says, by peace they will destroy many. Now, that's one of our vocabulary words. Remember, by peace they will destroy many. Destroy many, referring to the fact in Daniel 8:25 that these great wars are coming. Okay? These great wars are coming. And that's what he writes here. By peace they will destroy many. This means great wars are coming. So this shows you that the peace that they have is not true peace. You know, it's a fake thing that it's not any solution that's going to bring peace. Only the peaceful solution can do that. But this is a form of government or their system that they're pushing upon other nations so that they can have, quote unquote, peace. Okay? They'll go in and destroy a government that already exists, where the people are already doing okay, and then they'll go in and tear down that government and completely try and rebuild it with democracy. And that's why it doesn't work. Now notice he says in verse 13 that blasphemy. Okay, so underlined by peace they will destroy many. This means great wars are coming. That's the vocabulary word there. But he says in verse 13 that these blasphemies, okay? Now here's a reference note for you. In the side note, in Zechariah 20:27 says, blasphemy is rejecting Yahweh's way, okay? So there's a side note there, Yekeshki 20:27, rejecting Yahweh's way is blasphemy, okay? And that's what they do. They reject Yahweh's way. And this was in the very beginning, remember, in the garden, when mankind rejected the tree of life. Okay, continuing on here, he says, now, I read to you yesterday the Jerusalem agenda and how they plan to take this city and give it to the Pope. You might underline that too, the Jerusalem agenda, and how they plan to take this city and give it to the Pope. Okay, now that was back on pages, if you want to write it down, that was for your reference, that was back on pages 17 through 19. It goes through all these different articles, and it explains about the Jerusalem agenda here and how they plan on taking the city and giving the city to the Pope so that they can have this great tourist attraction and stuff. So he says, you could not have brought this about without great planning. You know, they had to have great planning to take this apart, bring this about. I don't know whether you remember this or not, but years ago when we used to have you remember on Sabbath afternoon we would have the news and we'd gather together and we'd watch the kind of like the highlights of what took place throughout the year, throughout the week and stuff. One of those things was it showed about the Palestine Papers. I don't know if anybody remembers about that. It was about the Palestine Papers. Al Jazeera had this information. And let me just show you right here. Maybe it's to refresh your memory. If you remember the Palestine Papers, Al Jazeera released nearly 1,700 secret documents revealing the truth behind the Arab-Israeli peace process. It's the largest ever leak of confidential documents related to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Thousands of pages of diplomatic correspondence detailing the inner workings of the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. These documents, memos, emails, maps, minutes from private meetings, accounts of high-level exchanges, strategy papers, and even PowerPoint presentations date from 1999 to 2010. And so this just, as I said, a note, this just shows the planning that took place. Now, this was something that we showed on the news and stuff. To me, it astounded me whenever I saw it, because they went through and they have it all. I mean, everything that went on in these meetings, they recorded it, and they wrote it all down and stuff. And so they had some actors, and they were acting it out during these segments that they showed on Al Jazeera. They were acting it out, and they were telling you, the different parts, and you could read it. I mean, you could remember these parts that they were saying when you read the news and knew what went on in the news articles and stuff. So it just shows you the amount of planning that went into all of this. Because remember, if they're planning to give this to the Catholic Church, then they themselves have to be on the side of the Catholics and Catholics themselves. And the Catholic, most people just picture a Catholic as being, the little holy Joe with his hands up with the halo over him, going to church and kneeling and getting communion. But remember, Catholic refers to the fact of universal and so forth. These people are scattered throughout all the earth. And they even have one of the particular lines, the Jesuits in their priesthood, who fit right in with everybody. You never know a Jesuit when you've seen them, until he went into action. And of course, you could see what the desires that he would fulfill for the church and so forth. But they fit in there. And so they have their people everywhere. So even though they may be called, the Jewish state and so forth, the Israelis, they're still pushing for what the Catholic Church wants, okay? And that's clear when you see the meetings, all with all the Pope, all the meetings they have. I remember years ago, Revelations talks about how the Pope has, the Vatican has the city, the great city that has rule over all of the nations in the world and so forth. And it was this one film, man, I would love to find it again. There was this one film when they showed, there was a meeting, and there was this high official, I can't remember what country he was from, but he was standing there, and when the Pope walked into the room, this guy just started shaking. And he was shaking in his knees. The old saying, how you wobble your knees, somebody gets his knees started turning into rubber like that. I mean, they were just shaking like that. And I can't remember if he collapsed or almost did. People had to hold him up and stuff. Because he was so fearful, I guess, of the power of the Pope when he walked into that room, And it made you think about that prophecy that it talks about in Revelations, about the power that they have and the sway they have over the entire world. So he goes on here, he says, the main thing that is on this agenda is to give Jerusalem to the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church says that the location and history of the city is worth billions and billions of dollars in tourism. Tourism. Now, that's what they want. They want this because, for one thing, the Catholic Church doesn't want to have to pay taxes, you see. And so if this is given, these sites are given to the Catholic Church, they won't have to pay Israel taxes, okay? And that's their main thing. They don't want to pay those taxes. They want to collect the taxes, but they themselves don't want to pay it to the government because they know the amount of money that is in tourism. Here's just one thing. This is tourist attractions, and it says, overloaded with churches and home to the oldest continually used cemetery in the world, the Mount of Olives holds particular interest to religious pilgrim travelers to Jerusalem. The sacred hill is believed to be the place where God will begin rising the dead on Judgment Day. For Christian believers, there's also where Jesus ascended to heaven after his crucifixion and subsequent resurrection. The Church of the Ascension, they knew the exact spot where Jesus took off and went to heaven, and they built a church there, okay? They know those things. They know all this. So the Church of the Ascension on top of the mount dates from 1910. So I guess it took them over 2,000 years to figure out the exact location. Once they did, they built a church there. Okay? So walking down the slope, he says, you come to the church of Pater Noster, built next to the site where, according to tradition, Jesus instructed his disciples. How large of an area did Yeshua go through? And yet they found one particular spot and said, this is where he spoke to his disciples, you know. And people, they're so gullible. They fall for that, you know. Further down, the church of the Dominus Fide, whatever that is claimed to be built over the site where Jesus wept for Jerusalem. So it's just astounding how they can know these places. Along further down is the Russian church of Mary Magdalene, and then the Gardens of Gethsemane, where Jesus was arrested, and the Church of All Nations are next, while the tomb of the Virgin Mary is the last big attraction on the Mount of Olives. Now, this is just one location that all of these tourist attractions are based on. So you can see that if they branch out to other locations, the amount of money that they will bring in. And, of course, the tomb of the Virgin Mary, they know exactly where, well, you know, they know, you know, they have a church where Jesus was born. You know that, right? They know the exact place where he laid in the manger. I mean, the exact location. They know where he was, and they built this thing over it, and they built the church, and then they have a hole in the ground there, and you can see the exact spot where the little baby Jesus laid. That's where he was born. They also know the exact place where he was put to death, too, you know, so they have a church there to show that, you know, this is where he died at, you know. But this is, you know, it's sad to think that people can be so stupid and deceived that they actually believe this stuff. Now, these people are devout, man. I mean, there's I forget the name of the road, what you call it, Della Rosa or something. I can't remember exactly what it was. But, you know, people will go on these pilgrimages, and they'll get on their knees, and they'll walk for miles, and they're actually crawling on their knees for miles and miles until their knees are just full of blood and everything torn up, scraped up and everything. And to them, that's holiness. That's holiness. They're pious, you know. They're afflicting themselves for their God, you know. And that's the sad thing about it, and that's the deception that we've got to bring these people out of. Okay, so let's go on here. It says, there's no saying that for every tourist is worth 2 bales of cotton. This was 50 years ago when I heard that saying, he said. The billions of dollars that the tourists take to Jerusalem are tremendous. Everybody wants to go and see the land several times. Every time they go, they spend money in that area. Israel paid back $12 billion with tourist trade in a very short time. $12 billion. That was when they had tourists. He says they don't have any anymore because it's being taken away from them. That's because, remember, all the bombs and so forth and the killings that were going on. There are very few tourists in Israel anymore because of the bombings and all the violence going on. They've taken that away from them, and it's not worth much now. It will be once the Pope takes it over and the temple is rebuilt. Everybody on earth is going to want to go to see Jerusalem. That's going to be a big, big thing. I mean, it was. You know, I mean, the descriptions that you see in history, the temple was huge, and it was very tall, and it was on a tall spot, and it was white, and it glistened in the sun. And so when the pilgrimages, you know, when people were going to Jerusalem to keep the feast, to go to the house of Yahweh, to offer the sacrifices and stuff, when they were a distance off, they could see it, you know. And that just it's kind of like, you know, when people are driving to come to the house of Yahweh, the closer you get, the more energetic you get, the more you can't wait to get there and to walk on those grounds. Well, that's where it was for everybody as they were traveling to come in. They could see the house of Yahweh. They could see it there, and the white, you know, stones glistened in the sun and so forth. So everybody's going to want to see this. They will come with money again flowing into the Catholic Church. And that's what they want. They want that money. The old city of Jerusalem. Why do they want that money? Well, Satan wants. See, Satan, remember it says Satan made herself rich. Okay? So even though you'll have the power to make gold and anything you want and have anything, whatever you want, you can have it. Satan still lusts after riches and after wealth. And Yahweh says, you made yourself wealthy. You know, so there is some type of monetary system or whatever that is used throughout the heavens and so forth. But this just shows how the greed of the Catholic Church, because remember, what we see here on earth is a pattern of what's going on throughout the universe, okay? So they will come with money again flowing into the Catholic Church. The old city of Jerusalem is what everybody is going to want to see and to visit the temple, standing again in its magnificent beauty that Solomon himself created. Okay, and for a reference note, you can write down 1 Kings 6:1, verse 1, and verse 12 through 14. It just tells you how Solomon built the temple, built the house of Yahweh. And that's 1 Kings 6:1, 12 through 14. Now he says you can see the draw towards this land. It's a natural thing that was built for money. That's why they were wanting this today. Through this peace, they're going to bring about this democracy, notice. Through this peace, they're going to bring about this democracy. And that's for sure, he says. But in this shove to get in, they're bringing fear on so many nations right now. The nations are teaming up and combining their power to resist the United States and Britain. Even now, in this trade war, you see that Britain is pulling with the United States in certain things. Britain is also forming its own power over there. Of course, you got to remember, okay, now in the United States, people escaped from Britain, okay, and they came to the United States and they formed the United States and they supposedly, won their independence, right? But they fought against the British and they won their independence. And it became the United States of America and began to grow and so forth. But there's still very close ties because of the fact that they really are still part of the British Empire and so forth. None of that's really changed, but there's still this closeness, and that's why the British and Americans are still so close. And because you remember in history with Tony Blair, with Prime Minister Tony Blair, how close he was with the president and so forth. And they always worked together. When they went to war, they would go together and fought together in war and so forth. So you can see here, as it says, that these nations, some are combining their strength and coming against the United States and Britain in certain things. And Britain is also forming its own power over there. Whether or not, now remember, Britain, all that was under control of British rule at one time, and then they turned it over. But, they're still coming back in now in these last days, siding with the United States. Whether or not it turns against the United States, he says, I don't know. I'm checking some prophecies right now that might indicate that it will. He says, later on, now underline this, you will see this thing breaking up as Yahweh shows the iron mixed with clay. Okay, underline that. You will see this thing breaking up as Yahweh shows the iron mixed with clay. Because he says there's nothing here that can hold it together. There is no power or strength that will actually hold this together. There's no love or anything like you would find based on Yahweh's laws. Someone has the handout for Daniel 2, 41 and 42.
And because you saw the feet and the toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom will be divided, but there will be some of the strength of the iron in it. For you saw the iron mixed with the earth's clay. Just as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle.
Partly strong and partly brittle. See, because of the fact that there's nothing to hold them together. Iron and clay don't mix. That's obvious. But it's shown there. And remember, this iron and this clay is that was in King Nebuchadnezzar's vision that he saw with the big statue of the head of gold and so forth, and then the very bottom and the feet were iron and clay, showing what would take place in the last days, how it could not hold together, because there's nothing there to hold it together. Demonocracy, or democracy, okay, has nothing to keep you together, okay? Because it's based upon the wealth have control, okay? And they do what they can, and they don't care about the little people. And this is why there's so many laws that come out against the poor, because it's not based upon Yahweh's law. There's no love. There's nothing there that can hold them and bind them together like Yahweh's law can. Because Yahweh's law says you'll always have the poor among you, but you must love your neighbor as yourself, right? And you take care of the poor, because that's showing love for one another. But it's not based that way with the world. Okay, so he says, turn to Matthew 24. He says, we covered that one. This shows you that what will actually take place. The Pope will take that land, and then he will take his seat there along with the Queen of Heaven. And remember, we talked about the fact that in every church, in every cathedral, there is the seat that the Pope, the bishops sit at, and then, of course, in the Vatican, the Pope has this big old fancy throne that he sits on and stuff. But that symbolizes the fact of Satan's seat, of that they will rule together, okay? Because that's what the whole thing is based upon. The Catholic religion is based upon sun god worship, okay? They have everything is a sun. That's why you see the halos in the paintings of the pictures of the saints. They have the round halo over their head. That's supposed to represent holiness. It's a sun disk. You know, it represents the fact that they worship the sun god. And everything is based upon that. And everything that they even have the hopes, you know, where the priest carries around this little stand that's got this host where they put in there. And then all the way around it is the big sunburst. And it's all shiny gold, you know, to show you the fact that this is where their power comes from, is worshiping the sun god. And that's why, of course, they have Sun Day that they worship. Okay, so in Matthew 24 here, he says, turn to Matthew 24. Matthew 24, verse 15 says, therefore, when you see the Lord of the heavenly habitation, the abomination of desolation, okay? Notice I underline that, the abomination of desolation, okay? Because remember, that was one of the vocabulary words. Go back to this. The abomination of desolation means the Lord of the heavenly habitation. Okay, the Lord of the heavenly habitation. Now, this word, the Lord of the heavenly habitation. Let's go through this a little bit, get a little more understanding on it. Abomination of desolation. Okay, is the way it's referred to. If you go back to the book here real quick now. Go back to the book. It says it was the Interpreter's Bible Dictionary. It says that I used years ago in the mark of the beast to show that this abomination of desolation actually means the Lord of the heavenly habitation. Okay? The abomination of desolation means the Lord of the heavenly habitation. Underline that. Now, the Lord of the heavenly habitation. The abomination of desolation. The word abomination is number 946. It means a detestation, something that's detestable. Okay? Desolation is number 2050, and it means despoliation. Now, despoliation is the act of the process of despoiling or spoliation. To despoil means to strip of belongings, possessions, or value. Okay? As in war. You know, because in war, the value of life means nothing to people, right? Spoliation means the act of plundering, the state of having been plundered, especially in war. Also, the act of injuring, especially beyond reclaim. In other words, injury that you can't recover from. Okay? That's what the worship of the Lord of the heavenly habitation is all about. You know, life means nothing to them, and war means everything. And of course, that's the ways of democracy. Now, it's the Lord. Okay, in Webster's, Merriam-Webster's dictionary, the word Lord means one having power and authority over others. Okay, notice that, over others. Not to serve somebody, but just to have the power and authority over someone. It also means one who has achieved mastery or that exercises leadership or great power in some area. Okay, so they have achieved this, and they exercise this leadership and great power, but it's not necessarily righteousness. Okay, it's just that they have the power and the lust and the desire to rule over people. It's from the Old English word which means loaf keeper. Lord means loaf keeper, or one who guards the loaves. That's what the word Lord means. Yeshua Messiah, remember, he says, believe in me, for I am the bread of life. And of course, Satan says, no, believe in me, for I am the bread of death. Okay? And remember, the world just celebrated this a few days ago, right? In Halloween and stuff. And they don't even realize what they're doing. You know, they don't have any concept at all what they're doing when they keep Halloween. You know, they have no earthly idea. If they did, they would be shuddering and shaking in utter disgust. But that's the thing, you see, is they don't. But remember, they have chosen that. Deception is a choice. You choose what you want to believe, okay? So, the abomination of desolation means the Lord of the heavenly habitation. So let's go on here. It says, Matthew 24:15. Therefore, when you see this Lord of heavenly habitation, the abomination of desolation, it was in the Interpreter's Bible Dictionary that I used years ago in the Mark of the Beast, to show that this abomination of desolation actually means Lord of the heavenly habitation, standing in the holy place. Whoever reads, let him understand it, and let those who are in Yada, or those who have lift up holy hands, remember we covered that before, Yada means those who lift up holy hands to Yahweh, right? Let them flee into the promotion. Promotion. Okay, well, here's what promotion means, notice. Flee into the promotion. That was one of the vocabulary words. This is the same word that's used in Isaiah 2:2. Now, we know what that means. Isaiah 2:2, Micaiah 4:1 talks about the uplifting of the promotion, the mountain of the house of Yahweh, right? So it's the same word that's used in Isaiah 2:2, where it says the promotion, underline this, the uplifting of the house of Yahweh, okay? Let them flee to the house of Yahweh is what he's saying, okay? Let them flee into that uplifted place. And notice, uplifted is comprised of word 3733, and it also means woman. It also means woman, as Revelation refers to the house of Yahweh as a woman. So flee to that place, not intending to go back, as Yeshua said, don't even return to take anything out of your houses. Just get out of there and get to the house of Yahweh. And he showed it to be that urgent. Now, Yeshua was warning everybody. When you see this, and it's told, get to the house of Yahweh. The pastor has said this. And the pastor's already said this about at least, I know this is at least the fourth time. And he made it very clear at the feast. Be here. Move here for the feast. Which means there's going to be a lot of preparation for people coming here. It's going to change. Oh yeah, you think it's real great, but just remember something. This is the place of testing. If you can't get along with your brothers right now, you're going to be for a lot more tests, okay? But this is the place of perfection, okay? That shows the urgency of the time, man. We're not playing around. We've got to get ourselves together because the time is soon, okay? So he says here, flee to that place. And Yeshua is saying, don't go and get anything. Don't go up on the housetop and get something. And he showed the urgency of it. Now, when the calling goes out, give heed and listen. Okay? Because there's nothing out there that we need. We've got everything that we possibly need right here in the house of Yahweh. Everything. Okay? And if we don't have it, guess what? We don't need it. Plain and simple. Pastor has worked so incredibly hard all of his life. This man has slaved day and night with countless sleepless nights to make sure that we have everything we need. He knows, he learns the lessons. He knows what Moshe went through. He knows what Moshe had to suffer with and how the people were stiff-necked and rebellious and how they murmured because they didn't have what Egypt offered them. You don't have what Walmart has. Who gives a damn about Walmart? You should be thinking about your salvation, okay? And realizing that what we have here is all that we need. We're talking about salvation. We're not talking about the cares of this life. And it's something that really needs to be thought about. So, if something you want out there, get it, okay? Get it and get prepared. Because we've always said that. If there's certain things that you want, get it and stock up on it, okay? So that you'll have it. So that there won't be any murmuring when the time comes, okay? Because murmuring it takes your mind completely off the focus of what it needs to be. Our focus needs to be on getting right with one another because we have a world to bring peace to. And then from the world, we've got to train billions and trillions of people. Trillions of people we have to train. And then we got to take those trillions of people and use them to go out and to take care of the universe. It's a tremendous job. So if we set on our own little petty selves, that's where our mind is not focused on the work of Yahweh, right? But that's why it gives us great joy when we do work together, right? And at the end of the day, it's like King Solomon says, at the end of the day, you can look back and say, hey, I had a part in that, you know? And you rejoice at the fact of the work that you accomplished that day, you know? And it's a great joy. Because everything that we do is for a reason. Okay, so Daniel 11, verse 41, he says here, and so he will enter this place of beauty. Okay, that place of beauty. Remember what the place of the land of beauty was? Israel. He will enter the place of beauty. This subject started back in Daniel 2:28. Daniel 2:28. He says, go back there. Now, Daniel 2:28 was the fact where Nebuchadnezzar had his dream. And Yahweh, I mean, who can give? He calls forth the people and he says, okay, wise men, you know everything, right, wise men? Then you tell me what my dream was, because I forgot it. And then you tell me the interpretation of it. Because you're smart. You're the wise men, right? You can seek the gods and get all the answers. And they were freaking out because they were all going to die because the death penalty had gone out against them. And so Daniel says, think of the faith that this man had. He stepped out and said, King, give me an opportunity and I'll tell you your dream. And then he prayed to Yahweh. That's the contact that this man had with Yahweh. He prayed to Yahweh. And when he went before King Nebuchadnezzar, he says, King, it's not that I'm anything. I'm no different than any other man. But Yahweh chose to give you this interpretation of your dream. And then he proceeded to give it. In Daniel 2:28, he says, but there is a Father in heaven who reveals secrets, and he makes known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what will take place in the latter days. That's our day. Nebuchadnezzar saw what was taking place in our day, okay? In Daniel 12:40 says, then the fourth kingdom will be strong as iron, since iron breaks to pieces and subdues all things. And it will break in pieces and crush, which means, of course, war. You will break in pieces and crush. So this was showing you the wars that were going to take place in these last days, okay? So that's what he's talking about here when he says, go back to Daniel 2:28 about Nebuchadnezzar's dream. He says, I'm going to show you what will take place in the last days, or as we translated here, the latter days, but it's the same meaning. Look on over to verse 40 as we just read. Verse 40 said the fourth kingdom is going to break into pieces. And you'll see this fourth kingdom. Now this is what we're facing today. This is the first part of Revelation 13. The second part of Revelation 13 was not yet invented. There were no multitudes, nations, and tongues in this land of America at that time. But the fourth beast in Revelation 17 said, came up where there were multitudes, nations, and tongues. And this is it. You know, it's the United States. Now it subdues, and underline, it will break into pieces and crush. This means war. Okay? The breaking into pieces and crushing means war. This, a handout. Who's got the handout for Daniel 7:23?
This is what he said. The fourth beast will be the fourth kingdom upon earth, which will be different from all other kingdoms, and will devour the whole earth, and will tread it down and break it in pieces.
Different. Notice, it's different from all others, right? You know, the churches are probably envy the House of Yahweh with the young people, the way the young people can read these scriptures, huh? You know? And they know what it means, too. They know what it means. So, breaking in pieces. So, this fourth beast is different from other beasts, and it tramples, it breaks down and tears up, okay? So, he says that is what democracy, or this beastly machine, is all about. That's what it's all about. It looks great on the outside because they're promising the people a vote on what goes on and the laws that are going to be passed. But if and that's what every politician brags on. Oh, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this when I get to Washington, But soon they get there and they find out they got to fit in with everybody else. It's a well-oiled machine, and either you fit it in or the machine will spit you out. But if you read the history, he says, read history and you will see what's taking place here in the United States. You'll see they're slowly taking away all the rights of the forefathers that the forefathers gave. When America was started, these men came here for a reason. But what the forefathers have now started to begin with is far different from what we have now. It says, the forefathers were under the same government. They came here to America. They were oppressed and they were depressed. And remember, they traveled in these ships over the water, over the oceans, and many of them died, and then they had to completely go to a place of wilderness and start building cities and so forth. So it was something that it was very hard on the people, but they were oppressed and they were depressed. And they fled here in droves to get away from the oppression that set up a government and passed constitutional rights, where they thought this could never take place again. This is why this was called the New World. They thought they were going to have a new beginning. Come to the New World. That's why you have sound. That's why you have cities and stuff named like New York. Okay, this is the New York. York is in the British Empire. All these cities and states and so forth that are named with new in front of it is referring to that, like New Orleans, okay? New Orleans is a French place and so forth. They came when the settlers came and they established a place. They just simply named them places where they had come from, and so forth. But they thought this will never take place again. They will set up a nation, and they will set up a government that will be fair and free, and you won't have any oppression over your religion. You can worship whatever you want. Of course, they all thought, well, we're all worshiping God, so if you worship God, you're okay. And that's what democracy was set up upon, is to worship God. It's God worship. It's a form of God worship, a government of God worship. But he says, constitutional rights. They say or laugh in Washington anymore. There's no such thing as constitutional rights. They're being voted out. The rights, again, of being taken. That is democracy. That is democracy, okay? Where you can pass laws to take away what you don't want the people to have. What you don't want the people to have. Where you don't want them, you just pass laws to keep them out. The Constitution. I found this pretty interesting. The Constitution. 33 amendments to the United States Constitution have been proposed by the United States Congress and sent to the states for ratification since the Constitution was put into operation on March 4th, 1789. The first 10 amendments were adopted and ratified simultaneously and are known collectively as the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights, that's what is known as the Bill of Rights. The first 10 amendments, that's what the whole thing was based upon. As of this year, beginning of this year, approximately 11,770 proposals to amend the Constitution have been introduced in Congress since the first signing of it in 1789. Over 11,000 proposals to change the Constitution, to add to it, to add all these amendments. You know how big the Constitution would be if all this had gone through all these years? But the first 10 was called the Bill of Rights, okay? And that's what America was first set upon. It was founded upon these Bill of Rights. It's interesting because there was 10 amendments, you know, like the 10 Commandments. But there was a lot more morals back then. Now, these people weren't in the house of Yahweh. They didn't know Yahweh. But morals were there because they taught from the Bible and so forth. They believed in the Bible. This is why you see, this is why Webster's dictionary, okay? Not so much the newer ones now, but the older ones. You look at them, and all of their references come straight from the scriptures. They give you a definition of a word, and they'll find the scripture back that uses it and shows it to you. So this Bill of Rights is what it was all based upon, is that you had these certain rights. And from that, of course, they added on another 23 onto that, so there's 33 now. But, 11,770, it's mind-boggling. It's crazy, man. But that just shows you how man's government doesn't work, you know, and how they try to add to it. So he says here that democracy is not based on righteousness, where all people follow a set of righteous laws that prevent them from hurting or harming anyone else. To keep you from being stolen from, they have to pass laws. Not just one law. Yahweh's law says, do not steal. There are no limitations to that law. You do not steal. You don't steal from anyone. And that means, that includes everybody on the face of the whole earth. You don't steal. Point blank, period. That's it. It's plain and simple. Man's government has to have thousands of laws to keep a person from stealing. And it doesn't even accomplish that goal. Because people still steal. So they'll lock them away and put them away for life, you know, because of certain things. It just doesn't make any sense. There's no laws that hold mankind together. That's found in democracy. That almost sounds radical, doesn't it? But it's true. We know it's true. It's straight from the scriptures of what we're teaching. Okay, so he says, verse 43. This is in Daniel 11, verse 43. And just as you saw the iron mixed with earth and clay, they will mingle themselves together with the seed of men. And they will not hold together, just as iron does hold to clay. Okay? Notice, almost every lexicon here says that this means, and what he's talking about is, they will mingle themselves with the seed of men. This means with men in marriage. Okay? Now, two of the same gender, of course, cannot have offspring. Right? You can't have two of the same have offspring. But you notice they have rights for the homosexuals, right? Homosexuals want their rights. And they support equal rights for everyone. Everybody has equal rights. And a lot of people get fearful and think, well, the homosexuals, you know, they want to take over the world and so forth. Well, they are taking over in that sense because it's freely there. But if you notice what they fight for equal rights. Now, equal rights means that if this person over here can practice his homosexuality, this person over here has a right to be straight. Why is that? Homosexuals know you've got to have equal rights because of the fact that unless you do allow the straights, as they want to call them, to have families and to produce offspring, they won't have anybody to molest. They won't have anybody to pull into the sin of homosexuality. So they have to allow equal rights to allow others to have offspring so that they can teach them and grab them into, the Catholic Church and turn them into homosexuals and so forth. This was nothing new. This goes way back to the Greeks and Romans and Egyptians and Babylonians and so forth. You read in the scriptures the word catamite. Look it up and see. I'm not even going to talk about it because it's pretty sick. But look at the word catamite and see what it means. And then you'll know and you'll see what the world is and state is in today. So he says here, what do you see in the Catholic Church today? You notice how quickly they crushed that story? Think about it. If it had, this is when it was first coming out about the troubles that the Catholic Church had. He says, think about it. If there had been some other small church where this was going on, they would be out of business by now. You don't even hear about it anymore, what's going on with the priests and the little boys. Just like that situation, there's nothing there to hold together a family. There's nothing between men and men that would build a family. It totally wipes it out. They would die off if they didn't have others coming from a family who they could use and defile. Okay? Verse 44, it says, now underline this. In the days of these kings, in this time period, in the days of these kings, Yahweh himself will select the family, a kingdom of priests. Okay? Yahweh himself will select the family, a kingdom of priests, who will rule or who will actually follow the laws that's based on benefiting all the people, not just one or two. These are laws that can't be twisted or done away with. Okay? And in Daniel 7:7, it says, you see the same subject, the same kingdom. And remember, underline this, he breaks in pieces, he crushes, he mingles with war. And what I did is I just drew a little line from that paragraph down over to the left. You see the paragraph right below it? He will break into pieces and crush. This means war. You can kind of tie those in together there, and you see it. It's talking about the same thing. And that's one of our vocabulary words. You break in pieces, meaning war. In verse 7, we see the fourth beast again. After this, I saw in the night vision, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible and exceedingly strong. And it had great iron teeth. It devoured, it broke in pieces, and then it trampled the residue with its feet. It shows you beastly system that a beast has no feelings. It attacks, it rips, it tears up its victims. It has no feelings, okay? It has no regard for others. It devoured, broke in pieces, and trampled the residue with the feet, okay? And it was different from all the beasts that were before it. It had 10 horns. And this is the same one shown in Revelations that has 10 horns. For a reference note, there's Revelations 13:1, where it says, he saw the beast come out of the sea having 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, Yochanan speaks of the 7 heads and 10 horns. Daniel only makes mention of 10 horns. The reason why is because it wasn't until they moved to Rome when they had the 7 heads or the 7 heels of Rome, okay? And that's the difference that Yochanan shows. He shows this, and remember, this is in the last days where we know this information. Okay, and continue on, he says, then the 10 kings upon his head, or 10 crowns upon his head. And I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn. Now, this is one of our vocabulary words. Remember, the little horn, this is the spokesman in these last days that started insignificantly, but this is the Catholic Church. Okay, the little horn is the spokesman of the Catholic Church, which came to be the strongest power that combines, devours, takes into its teachings all the governments of the world. That's how powerful this thing has become. It's taken all the governments into the world, and that's exactly what we see in prophecy in the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation, remember, Yochanan was shown these things by the only man who knows this stuff on the face of this earth, and that is Yisrayl Hawkins. Remember that, okay? So he says, remember the other ones were insignificant, and some of them fell by the power of this little horn. So next week we're going to continue on, and we'll see about the power of this little horn and we'll see how these things have actually taken place. The tests, if you haven't gotten the test, let me know. Let me give you this information here. For tests, if you need a test to be sent to you by email to the House of Yahweh, Abelin, that's Abelin, not Abelin, Abelin, remember? Abelin@gmail.com, okay? And then we'll send you the test by PDF, okay?